So here's the deal for tonight. Here's what I was told my instructions were. I'm moderating the questions for you guys, and we'll be asking our panel. This is kind of like a fireside chat. So for about a half hour, I've got some questions that I will fire at our three experts in life sciences on this panel. Now, I hope, and the instructions are, guys, that you tell the good, the bad, and the ugly about your experiences. The true story, nothing but the truth. And if everybody swears that what happens at the BRC stays at the BRC, then we'll let them tell the true story about what happens. So at the end of about a half hour, we'll turn it over to you guys, and you guys can then, if we haven't asked what you really wanted to know, we'll turn it over to you guys so you can ask questions directly to the panelists. So let's get started. And here's the, the flow. Here's the flow of what I thought we'd do for tonight. It's kind of start with kind of their early, how did they get into the entrepreneurial arena? What was it like in the early stages of their startup company? What were the challenges, and then what were their lessons learned, and where are they now? So it's kind of a flow through their experiences. So let's start with that. So all of our three esteemed panelists had a deep academic background, PhDs, and then you went to the dark side. So you became entrepreneurial. Did you always know that you were entrepreneurial? Or when did you first realize that you had an entrepreneurial interest? And it's quick answers, to the point.
Well, as an undergraduate, I changed my major 5 times and couldn't figure out what's going on in life. I just knew I liked all techie stuff, so I went from chem engineering to EE to math to physics to chemistry to pre-med. And with 2 engineering degrees, went off to graduate school. Might have gone to med school, but I couldn't figure out how to pay for it. So PhD in organic chemistry was close enough. Coming out of PhD program, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. So I applied to business schools, law schools, and medical schools, thinking I'd go to school forever because that was fun. So was I an entrepreneur? I was definitely a maverick. Probably was an entrepreneur, just didn't know how to spell it yet. Somebody told me you ought to go get a real job, figure out what's going on, and maybe you'll decide what it is you want to do, and that was good advice. So 2 years at a Fortune 5 was enough for me, and I headed to California and Silicon Valley, and that's the rest of the story.
My story is a little bit like Jack. I was a chemistry major and came from Taiwan, did not speak English. And on the plane, I read a book called Double Helix by J.D. Watson that changes my life. I went to Harvard and switched, went to medical school, and without ever took a biology course. Graduated from Harvard, most of the kids stay in academia. I took Diverge, went into industry. I was at Roche, cloned the alpha beta interferon genes at the same time, on the same day, on the same petri dish. And then I joined a small company at a startup called Centigore and was responsible for some of their R&Ds. First was diagnostics, and then worked on the therapeutics. Then I switched to academia. I became professor at Baylor. That's how I came over to Texas for 7 years. And during that period, we had an idea about treating allergy, because my kids, myself, my husband, ex-husband, are all allergic. And so we had an idea to develop an anti-IgE for allergic diseases. And that was the beginning of Tanox. And then I switched after, sold the company to Genentech, went into the venture capital, went on the dark side, raised $200 million, and started a fund and invested in Asia. And just recently, last year, I truly left the position. Now I am free and on my own and work with Jack as an angel investor.
Great. Glauco, what about you? When did you know you were an entrepreneur?
I guess one thing is you better be a chemist, because we're all 3 chemists here. So, so yeah, I'm a chemist. I guess I'm a very intuitive guy, and I believe that never say never. And when I was doing my PhD, I worked at a biotech company at the same time. And I always said I would never wanted to found a company. So here I am. So after, and another path, I guess, that was very important for me and how this entrepreneurial path came about is, and I always keep saying this because it's true, it was friends and water polo. Because I came to US to play water polo, and I came to Houston and started playing water polo. The technology we invented, 3 of us play water polo together. That was pretty much how it came about, by just having crazy ideas on a napkin, and we tested. Granted, we kind of knew where we were going, and timing, because I was actually at the end of my Odyssey scholarship when we came up with this device that we coach ourselves, that we didn't start the project to do that, but it turned out that worked really well. And we were on a fork, either we make a company or not. And it was the right timing. My Odyssey scholarship was ending, and we started in 3D. So there wasn't that much thinking to be done at the time.
So, well, you partly answered this, but so all 3 of you. Jack, you founded a company too, Auto Lab, that was successfully sold. So you all founded companies. So you left what was a secure position in either a big company or at an academic institution to go to work for a startup. I assume you had no salary when you started that startup company. So what's it like? So why did you do it? Why were you willing to take the big risk jump? Give up the big salary from Baylor College of Medicine or somewhere else and go work for no pay at a high-risk startup when we know 80% of the startups fail?
Well, I worked for a Fortune 5 company for 2 years, as I mentioned, and the thing I learned in 2 years is they have more rule books, more HR manuals, more procedures than I could ever read or learn or memorize, and I knew that was not a place for entrepreneurs. So for me, bailing out of that world, structured world, big company world, was a breath of fresh air. I moved to Silicon Valley. I was very fortunate to get hired into a young company founded by a brilliant cantankerous scientist, a chemist, another chemist. He had taken a company with a single product from startup to 10 million in revenues on his own bootstrap capital. I think paid in capital was $1,000. But when he got up to about 10 million, he realized that he was a lousy manager. He was smart enough to know he was a lousy manager, so he brought in 5 hotshot young guys, all aged 27. And I got the best job of all. I got to be vice president of R&D to make the next generation of products. Of the other 4, 2 were Harvard MBAs. One was Chinese-American salesperson from Berkeley. And the 5th one was a PhD Purdue engineer who had lived in Europe for a while. And so it was an amazing team. I learned more from my 4 peers than I did anybody else in that whole era. So it was a great rounding out experience, but what I learned in a hurry is if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to run companies, if you want to found things, and if you're a techie nerd who wants to invent things, you know, you need to have a team approach. And I got that exposure early for how to put a team together, and that was one of the most important things.
To not have a paycheck, not know whether you'd be successful, or maybe you were so confident that you knew it would be a success.
I always do things with a purpose. It was a dream to make drugs. And I got very excited. I thought, what a wonderful thing, you got to invest in yourself. Hindsight, if I knew how hard it would be, maybe I would never do it. But when you're young, you have dream, and you have full of hope, and that was the best thing ever happened to me. And never giving a second thought. The fact of you don't have salary and you work for yourself, I thought I was the smartest kid on the block.
Glauco, you're still in the middle of it, I guess you'd say?
Yeah, I'm very much in the middle of it. But I guess ignorance is bliss, right? So not knowing how hard it could be, how long it takes to license a technology, and going through almost 1 year without a paycheck. And I was a postdoc before, so it wasn't...
so there wasn't much difference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but one thing that I always, whenever, the experience I had in biotech while I was doing my PhD was very important, because when I came up, when we came up with this technology and we saw it worked, I looked at it as like, I can put this in a box and I think I can sell it. Because somebody told me before, you know, especially when you're in a device, if your device cannot be placed in a box, it could be hard to sell. So I knew I could, and I had, and the team was key. I had some very smart people, some with already very good entrepreneurial experience, meaning they started a company that didn't work, which from reading, I think that's an important partner, because they know what not to do. So yeah, that's how it came about.
Can I add just a sentence or two to that? You know, the worst time to start a company is if you're about age 30 to 50, married, you have a house, you have a mortgage, you have a station wagon, you have a lawnmower, you have a dog, and maybe your kids are in school and you pay tuition, and, you know, so high risk interrupt income is a bad thing. On the other hand, if you're under 30, newly married or single, and your wife or spouse works, we call that a DINK in California. Are you familiar with that term, D-I-N-K? Double income, no kids. You know, gives you a lot of flexibility. One can keep the ship afloat while the other goes out and entrepreneurs, right? Or if you're over 50 and the kids are gone off to college and out of your house, you know, you can downsize the house and take some of the proceeds of that wise investment and maybe start companies. But 30 to 50 is a tough time. Under 30, over 50 is best time.
All right, so you founded the companies, and when we often hear that one of the most important things about founding a company is getting the right founding team, picking the right people, convincing the right people to jump off the cliff with you. So was that easy in the your first companies? Did you get the right people? Did you get some of the right people, some of the wrong people? What was your experience?
Well, I wrote my first business plan at age 27, and I had been R&D manager of this young startup that went from 10 million to 100 million in the 4 years plus that I spent there. And so as I was the most traveled R&D guy, so I went to all the trade shows, traveled all over the world, and I got to know the competition, mainly because it was smart to do so. So when I wrote my first business plan to start a new company, and what we made was things called computing integrators. These things look like modern PCs, but this is long before PC era. And so these things automate scientific instruments. What I did was, putting the founding team together, I went to my competition. So you get a 2-for-1 that way. You take a good guy out of the competition and you add a good guy to your team. And so my 3 co-founders, 2 came out of Hewlett-Packard and 1 out of DuPont. And they were the 3 biggest adversaries I had in my prior company, but it was one hell of a team to put that kind of experience together. But the problem is, how do you get them out of great positions to join a high-risk startup? And so you have to do that one at a time. And you go to one and maybe get a good conversation going, and if that warms up and you think that's doable, you go to the second and talk that up, and you say, you know, if I could get you, I can get him. And, you know, I think you can see the advantage of putting a team together where you all buy off on lower risk as a function of a strong team as opposed to just one individual or 2. But, you know, that takes a lot of practice and skillful experience to pull off, I tell you.
A lot of experience in order to sell them, to convince them to come.
Especially when you don't have financing lined up.
When you don't have any funding yet. What about Nancy, Glauco?
My path is a little different because I grew up in industry first. Larger company, then startup company. Centocor started from ground up. And I was the founding scientist and the first couple employee in the company. So I had an experience working at Centocor, started from nothing. How do you find money? How do you make the project work? So I graduated from I would say the Centocor School of Management. Centocor later on sold $4.9 billion to J&J. And then I went back to academia and then started up Tanox. By that time, I had a reputation already in the industry. So I started with a team who I know them during the previous tenure at Centacor. And some of them actually came down to Texas with me to start the company. And we don't have stars in the field, but we are a group of people that really believing in what we do. We took ownership of the company. I mean, ownership do not necessarily mean you have equity positions, but ownership of the problem, ownership of the project. Everybody was having the same idea, same dream. We're all on the same boat. And that was a fabulous time. And we all talk about it still today. It's a wonderful experience. But none of us are stars, but everyone was really committed. So commitment, trust, loyalty, aligned interest, purpose, and interest are all part of the element.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I guess that's for us, and I think for you guys in grad school and postdocs, I always tell you, try to bring your PI on board because it can make it much easier. That's when we got the first part of ugly. I was in a different lab, and when we decided to divide the partnership, the founding, the structure of the company, the initial structure of the company, there was a disagreement between us and my PIs. And, but at the same time, because it was probably the hardest moment, but it was, the final team came together very clearly because we stuck together, we trusted each other, and we didn't have to. So it made the team very cohesive, and it worked out. So, and I don't think if we had split the company the way it was originally proposed, it would have worked. Now that I know enough, I know for sure it would not have worked. So, because of course, whoever is putting the skin in the game is going to spend most of the time there, which in the case was me, you know, had to carry most of the ownership of the company. And we divided very well. The team's still together. It was the right team. And very importantly too, I knew those three guys would invite me for dinner often enough during the first year because it was, and I'm not kidding, it was a tough time. And we learned, again, I learned a lot of that we can live with very little. But it wasn't easy. And I tell my friends, if you have kids, I would not recommend. I don't think I would have started a company if I had kids at the time. And I don't have kids, so.
Well, let me advance on a little bit. So raising money. Imagine you all have tried to or did raise money for your startup companies. What was that experience like? What worked, what didn't work?
Well, if you've read Malcolm Gladwell's book, like Outliers, one of the things he says is right place, right time. You know, put yourself in the right place at the right time with the right idea. For me, that was fortunate that I went to this place now called Silicon Valley. But when I went there in the 60s, that was before it was called Silicon Valley, and the number of venture capitalists was less than 10. So one of them was a guy named Mark Rock who had financed a company called Vidar Corp. And I went to Mr. Rock with my plan, and he said, you know, I can raise, you don't need a lot of money to get started, maybe $1 million. He says, but better than my financing it is let me introduce you to a company that makes instruments like what you want to make. I know that they want to diversify. They'll put up the capital, and you could probably negotiate a deal to be an independent startup business under their envelope. And they also have plans to go public, so if it's a good fit, you might even dovetail on their going public. So it had a lot of advantages. And so a venture capitalist referred me to a corporate source of capital. It was the best thing that happened because it worked beautifully. But 2 years deep, that company got acquired all of a sudden, and a very favorable outcome for them, but we didn't fit the main business of the acquiring company. So we had a second chance to spin ourselves out and go source new capital again. So if you don't get it right or the best the first time, there's always a downstream opportunity. And we were very fortunate that it did.
Yeah, so that's interesting. You got your funding from corporate side, not from everybody. We all hear about angel funding and venture capital funding. What about you guys?
First, I put everything I have into the company.
What does that
Christmas.
mean?
That was Christmas. And by the way, I'm married. I was married, had 2 kids. And I actually raised the kids and built a company. I was a single mom very quickly after I had a company. And, but it can be done. It wasn't easy, but it can be done. I was lucky. In 1987, there was an article on Wall Street by Marilyn Chase. My advisor is Fred Goldberg, who told her, this is the smartest kids ever graduated from Harvard, got print on Wall Street. And that spiked a couple of VCs came and visited me. And Moshe came in, and 30 minutes later, he wrote a check of $6 million. I didn't take all 6, and I actually sent him back because at that time, I had 3 other VCs wanted to lead a deal. I tried to get them all working together, but there was no luck. Well, comes 1987 in October, that was a Black October day. Then I was on the street, and I only had a $4 million, and after that, there was no money. After Black October, there was none. And I knew all I had is this $4 million, and I gotta change my plan, and I have to do different things in order to propel and grow the company. And my experience in terms of raising money will be, not all money are the same. You have to find investors that do believe you and share the same vision. Because if they are not, I also later on became a VC, so I understand from the venture investment side and what is your LP who invested in the fund, what their expectation and time horizon is. And so it's very important to have money and the money share the same vision. I was very, very fortunate. My VC was Moshe Alafi, who also founded Amgen, Chiron, Applied Biosystems, Qiagen, many companies, and very, very successful VC in the industry. But I think in order to get money from VC, timing is very important. And also, what happened at work in 1987 may or may not, actually is not how you're going to do it today. The criteria change, the consideration and element and horizon change. So, yeah, but the most important thing, you do want to get the right people and who can work with you and share the same vision.
Glauco, you probably had the same situation, right? Somebody came in for 30 minutes and wanted to write you a $6 million check?
Not quite. But yeah, just to finish the last question. Yes, my friends ask me, they have kids, should I start a company? I always tell them no, but they still do it. So there are 2 of them, they're pretty successful. So I guess it's, maybe I would have done it too. But as far as funding, we bootstrapped, as I said, we learned very early that you don't have a company if you don't have a license for a technology. So we couldn't raise any money, even from, we didn't want to raise any money, not even take any money from friends and family that wanted to give us money. So we have to wait for that process to happen, which took much longer than I anticipated. But again, I went to a friend that played water polo with me in high school from Brazil, and he was the first one that came along. And then Tom brought another friend, and we're still on the angels round, and we're fortunate enough because we got the ETF funding, we got grants, we had the opportunity to have VC money, and the timing wasn't right, and was the first big gamble we had to do. And it was a long 2 weeks for us to hear between the phase 1 and get approved of phase 2 SBIR, which came through, which I was confident that we're going to get phase 2, and it did come through. Yeah, funding is, I'm still in the middle of it. We're very early, so we're still raising money.
I would add is that Houston is not an easy place to raise money. I tried also. I told you the story of how easy it was for me on the first round of financing. But then in Houston, I tried all the VCs. When I was early, they said, oh, no, you're too late. Then I was actually later, and they said, oh boy, you're too early. And so it was never was an easy moment. I don't know why is that, and I sympathize all the entrepreneurs starting here in Texas and Houston. I think one of the things that we don't have here is enough VC money or enough angel money to help the entrepreneur to start, and that's one of the reasons why, even as I retired and stuck out in Texas and still working with some of the entrepreneurs locally to help them to grow the company.
I couldn't agree more.
Let me just ask a couple last questions and then open it up to the audience. I'll maybe just go to the advice. What advice? So a lot of the people in this room probably interested in starting their own company, becoming entrepreneurs. What advice would you have from your own experiences?
Well, tying that in with the last subject, the best way to raise money is to do what you said you were going to do with whatever last money you raised. Now, if you're a first-time startup, you don't have that little short track record, so you've got to raise money by any means. And so, you can max out your credit cards, you can find a rich uncle or a friend who might give you a little startup capital, family money, or maybe find an angel investor if you're lucky, but you got to get it up and going. But once you do, it's pretty clear the best way to raise money downstream is to do exactly what you said you would accomplish with the first money. So spelling out clear milestones, which, if accomplished, would constitute a perceived step down in risk, therefore a perceivable step up in value. And that's what will interest new investors. So raise the minimal amount of money to get up and going, make the milestones happen, get prepared. You don't want to go to the venture capitalists or even the heavy hitter angel investors half-cocked or not prepared. They'll throw you out on your ears and wish you luck and tell you to come back when you get your act together. And so, getting that act together in that first key phase of startup is really very crucial.
Advice?
My advice, along with, I think it's similar along what Jack says, you deliver what you said you're going to deliver. I think the most important thing is how do you navigate the process? From morning to night, you have all the decisions you make, but what the decision you make will determine what kind of company, how successful you will be. If you are smart enough, wanted to start up a company, and you wanted to be a CEO, you probably have some good idea about what to do. And often CEOs are pretty stubborn about their objectives and what they want to accomplish. But what you're lacking is experience. If I had to do it all over again, I told this to Jack many times because we've done a lot of deals together. I said I would work with entrepreneurs that would listen to us, because nothing can replace experience. You don't know what you don't know. I didn't know what I did not know. And if I had known, my life would be a lot easier. Tanox happened to be successful. But it could be a lot more successful because the product we have and the product that I will see being launched in the next 3 to 5 years but it's no longer ours. Many things can shape the decision, but if you don't have the right experience, you can waste a lot of time spinning wheels, reinventing wheels. In a sense, you don't have to. Have a very fixed idea, and often will create actually issues. Actually, you will become the worst enemy of yourself, and that's not a very good thing to have.
No, I can agree more. Again, I'm an earlier stage, but putting myself on postdoc, grad student that have a technology, you got to make sure your technology works. Because sometimes it's a good idea, you think it works on your hand, but doesn't work very well. That's not enough. You have to make it work. We're fortunate that our system works really well, and there's no way we would have made it if it didn't work. Be prepared and have your plan very tight, very together, because you're going to be grilled always when you present your business plan. And Jack grilled us during the ETF, so and we got the ETF, so it was okay. But yeah, and again, get advisors and listen. You do have to listen. You may know how your system works, but you do have to listen. And we surrounded ourselves with, from day one, we're at HTC with Tom Craft. From very much, Tom Craft is the one that actually told us that you guys should start a company. So, and surround yourselves with people that have been there, that have failed, and tell you what not to do. A lot of times it's hard for people to tell you what to do, because usually you have a unique system. But the not to do has huge value, probably more value than what to do, I think.
You look like you have some final words you want to say.
Well, yeah, in fact, I'd like to take a little survey. How many of you are graduate students in science, engineering, or medicine? Because I see a show of hands. That's probably 2/3 of the room. How about MBAs? Any MBAs in here? How about, did we let any lawyers in here tonight? Okay, well, yeah, okay, we have a token lawyer. Here's something I think is very important. Most of us who pursue graduate degrees in science, engineering, or medicine, you do a couple of years of detailed coursework, and you're fortunate to get through that, and then you get to pick a professor, or they pick you, and you have a research project. Now, first of all, it's that person's idea, not yours, but you may fall in love with it, you may make notable contributions, and maybe get a paper or two published, and maybe some substantial breakthroughs, who knows. But your first idea, or somebody else's idea, is never going to be your best idea. But we all fall in love with it because it's a ticket to our advanced degree, and we love that professor who helped us, and we're at some great institution like Rice or Baylor or whatever. And so, we tend to get a little bit landlocked into that degree-oriented research project, and being in love with it, it's hard to let it go. Now, here's the thing. The number of those that are going to allow you to bail out and go form a company around that science is a pretty small percent. I think you would agree. So if you, at that moment, think you want to be an entrepreneur, maybe not try to productize what you happen to be lucky enough to work on is the best idea. But what do you do to get ready to find the best idea? You've got to survive till the right idea comes along. So, that's why in a career planning model that we've had a lot of experience with in a lot of different institutions, is what we do is we have a systematic way of going about it. So, the real systematic way is get your MD or PhD or MBA, go join a Fortune 5 and develop some maturity and see how things are done right. But don't stay too long, because that's a little slow growth, boring environment. Jump from that into a hotshot, high growth company like a Google or Yahoo or something moving fast, or a Microsoft. But don't stay too long if you want to be an entrepreneur. Then you're really prepared. You've developed the maturity, and you have the backbone to then jump into a young Tanox or a young startup company that you're much. So that systematic way of getting prepared, assuming you don't have the hotshot, groundbreaking idea to start with, I think is very important.
How about questions from you guys in the audience? Yeah, one back there. Holler out.
Yeah. So basically, I think you just contradicted what you were saying a while ago, that you basically want to do anything before 30 or after 50. And if you take this path, you just said, I was counting years. When would I get here? How to be 38?
A great entrepreneur named Garaj Deshpande, Indian, IIT undergrad, came to Canada for a PhD, came down to Boston. He's founded 3 telecom companies, and he's a billionaire, so hugely successful. In my classroom at MIT, he was telling his story, and he went to the blackboard and he drew a thing called timeline. And he says, no matter what country you're from, what culture or whatever, you're going to spend about 20 years or so getting through growing up in high school and college. And then if you go off to graduate school, it's another 4 years or something. So you're something close to 25 when you're getting prepared. And then if you jump into a Fortune 5 for a couple of years, you're 27, and then a middle growth company, you're 30-ish. So yeah, you're knocking on the door of that club I talked about. But again, you know, depends on how heavily entrepreneurially you're driven. If you're restless and just can't take the Fortune 5 or structured environment, you want to go plunge into something. Here's the bad news or the high risk part. If you jump into a young startup and you happen to be unlucky, that one doesn't make it, it runs out of money or fails, and you spent 2 or 3 years there, then you jump into a second one, and then maybe a third one. And if you build a resume of failed startups by bad luck or jumping in unprepared, immature, too young, or whatever, somebody's going to look at your resume a little later and they're going to question your judgment for joining those kind of companies. On the other hand, if you joined Hewlett-Packard and stayed 2 years and then went to Google for 3 and then went into a startup, nobody's ever going to question your judgment. That shows a lot of smarts, maturity, and planning ahead.
What else?
I've got one.
Well,
yes, this one's mainly for Glauco. I guess you were the one that did this most recently, but you all were saying that, you know, money's hard to come by in Houston, and, you know, we're trying to build this Houston community of entrepreneurs. So what advice would you give to people that want to raise money or looking for money for their seed stage startups?
So advice for Houston startups, people looking for money in Houston.
I think I'm looking for that advice. That's my answer. Yes, ETF, I guess, if you may think if it was an ETF, and I think we may talk about that, ETF and the SBIR, which we got, was key for us to be where we are, and to grow the company, I think, the way that that would be successful. So yeah.
Go outside, Houston. Sometimes that's how I did it. So I did raise money from as far as the government of Singapore and Lombard Odier, which is a Switzerland, Geneva-based VC firm. I did have German money. I have California money, Switzerland money. Never was in Texas. So
the money wasn't, but the company still was?
Yeah, the company is here in Houston, and it has its good and has its bad part of it, having a company in Houston. I remember Kleiner Perkins told me that move to California, and we'll invest. If you stay in Houston, we're not. Don't say the same thing to me. But you can't go outside, and I have done it before. The environment might be different today, but there are money outside. And I do agree Houston is tough. And a lot better today than 20 years ago. And a lot more. There are 2 Andrew networks, very strong. And there's the Rice Business Plan competition, which is a great entry point for a great company that is ready for prime time. And they are also the corporate ventures. And Jacqueline Northcutt by Houston, she does a wonderful job and well connected. And I have friends who run Novartis Venture, Pfizer Ventures. So there are corporate venture around. So there are opportunities outside.
So let me add a part B to that question and put Jack and Nancy, I'm going to put you on the hot seat. So I know that you mentioned that you guys are both angel investors. So if I'm sitting here in the audience and I'm going, I've got a promising, hot startup company, how do I get money from you guys? How should I approach you? I told you I'd put you on the hot seat. Jack's willing to be on the hot seat.
Yeah, it feels good. Two thoughts come to mind. Number one, Texas is somewhat a latecomer to the high-tech startup party. You know, for a state with 25 million people, nation's second most populous, we're a latecomer. And that's why, you know, 2/3 of all high-tech enterprise, venture capital, angel investment, is in Silicon Valley and Boston, New England. California is over 40%, Boston, New England, 18%. So nearly 2/3 of the entire nation. And so that doesn't help us here because we're latecomers to this grand party. On the other hand, Houston's a great city full of very smart, risk-oriented, fearless, trailblazing, pioneering kinds of people, super educated. So we got all the right ingredients. But you know what? It's easier to raise $10 million with a phone call if you have an idea of where to drill another hole in the ground to find oil than it is to raise $500,000 for a medical device startup with 3 patents coming out of MD Anderson or Methodist. And so what we don't have is enough people in this big city comfortable with the risk culture of high-tech startups in general, and particularly life science startups. And so we need more of that. Who are those people? Well, angel investors are a good approach. Angel investors are generally people who have founded enterprises, made a bunch of money and success, you know, then morphed into early retirement, get bored, want to do things with their time, become angel investors, and the help they can bring to the party is worth as much as the money that they bring to the party. And so we have a group of some 11 of us called the Goose Society of Texas, that in all 11 members are people who founded enterprises, a couple of venture capitalists, and so we accept business plan flow through that organization. One of us members would then meet with the entrepreneurs and founders and try to determine, is it at a stage suitable to present to the whole group? If not, we'll try to give you advice or help or refer you to people. But now here's the thing. Most companies are not founded by academics, politicians, lawyers, accountants, and service professionals and other good people. Most companies are founded by techie nerds, science engineers, inventors, people with ideas, people with visions, sometimes college dropouts, sometimes PhDs. But they have a product and a vision and an idea, and they need a little money to get started. And they need help on the business side. Most of them have never had any real business experience in their life. So there's a great marriage to be made. That's matching up MBAs who are looking for entrepreneurial careers, who have a Sterling Rice MBA on top of 5 years working experience before they came to Rice for that MBA, with these young techie nerds who have a product idea. Techie nerds need them for the business experience, and those people need techie nerds because techie nerds are the ones who usually start the company. So it's a great partnership. So the more of that matching we can do, the better off we are. And it doesn't take a lot of money to get a company off the ground. Usually a few $100,000 at most. And angel investors is the best way to approach that.
How about one last question from the audience? That's the Twitter. Where do you want to?
There's one from Owl Spark. How can we increase the quality and quantity of biotech startups we have rights and other institutions in the medical center? So if someone's in academia or at Rice and they have an idea, what is the best first step for them to take and how can the service encourage them to pursue their ideas?
Come to more meetings like this. Come to all the Rice forums that you can. Hang out at Houston Tech Center or Bio Houston. Discover groups like InVenture and Platform over in Rice Village. So hang around all the entrepreneurs you can and get all the intelligence you can about how to do these things. And then finally, if that's not enough, you can take my course at Rice, which is a course I brought here from Harvard Med School 7 years ago. It's called Role of Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers in the Startup World. It's every spring for 6 weeks, March and April. So it's coming up soon. The secret sauce is none of those great lectures it took me 10 years to fine-tune and prepare. The secret sauce is really the fact that I bring in a great entrepreneur at every class. So people like Billy Cohn, Art Sands, and many others like that. People who have day jobs like Billy Cohn, the cardiovascular, cardiothoracic surgeon. He's now spawned some 8 or 9 companies. He's terrific to listen to in a classroom. So the chance to hear 10 successful people like that in a structured class environment, I think can be very helpful. And so of the 100 or so that registered for this class, about 80 of them are from the Med Center, about 20 or so from Rice. You're welcome to do that. My TA, Matt, where's Matt?
Right here.
In the back is my TA this year, along with Joanna. Where's Joanna? So approach either of those two, and they'll tell you how to get in this class.
Nancy, you have an answer for that as well, how to increase the number of startups coming out of the institutions here?
I would say that maybe the development office of the university can work together, increasing the patent that being filed by the professors, and also echo Jack's comment about coming to a forum like this would be very helpful. Networking is very helpful, and also talking to people have been successful in building companies. Recently, there is a company here. I think one of the founders sitting here. They started by an oil man, Ron Zimmerman. And 2 days ago, their drug just got FDA approved. And that's such a successful story. All the companies based on lens technology, spun out of UT, and completely funded by angel investment. And that's a company I supported from very early on. Because what they have, not only a founder, but they have Ron, who committed to actually build the company up. And even though he was in the oil and gas, but he was smart enough to surround himself with the right advisor, hire the right young MBAs and the young managers. The company is wonderful. So this is a homegrown, great example. I have my own company, which happened to be in a high-tech area, even though I'm a life science member, spun out of U of H, a professor, Thompson, and they're heading out in public, and they're making lasers. And the company started from a university lab, and today their revenue is over 65 million, profitable, and it's a hotshot company coming up. So there are success stories, and how do they raise the money? They raise money from, like I said, they can't find the money in Houston, they go overseas. They go to different places. So, and then they grow the company, they started making revenues and started making product. And so there are ways to get there.
Good. How about, I was going to say one last question, a couple hands, how about right here, and then we'll wrap this up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Susan, you mentioned that you don't have a company, you don't have a license for technology. Does that mean that you haven't got something that's patented or patentable? It's not really much
Repeat the question in case everybody...
The question is, if you don't have a license, you don't have a technology. Is that pretty much what
you don't have a company? If you don't
have a company.
You mentioned if you don't have a license,
yeah,
then you don't have a company. I'm wondering, are you saying that you pretty much would have to have something that's either patented or about to be patented?
It depends which area. On life science, technology, drug, you need a patent. Otherwise, anybody can copy your idea, and you're never going to survive if you have a valuable product. If you're at MD Anderson, Baylor, postdoc, grad student, whatever you invented is not yours. It doesn't matter. It's not yours, period. So for your company to have a product, you have to have a license. And that's cost money because you need an attorney, and attorneys cost a lot of money, and you're going to need a good license because otherwise you're not going to be able to raise money after you get a good license. So you need a good attorney, which are more expensive. So there is yeah, you don't have a company, you don't have a product, basically, if you don't have a product. That's my experience, yeah.
Let me just add, in some product categories, licenses and patents are worthless. So for example, if you have a software product, there's always another way to write software to do almost the same thing and avoid any claims you might make about the other one. Almost the same thing is true in electronics. And that's why we have various ways to protect, you know, not just patents and licenses from whoever the patent owners, but also trademarks, but cut through that. Marketing execution into the marketplace, how you position the product, how well you execute, sometimes is more important than how strong those patents and patent claims are.
Super. Well, we need to wrap up, but let me do one thing first, and Jack doesn't know it. I'm going to put Jack on the hot seat, if you guys don't mind. Jack's played this game before. I don't know if this will work or not, but this is the word association game.
Okay,
You need a mic. You need the mic. Okay, word association game. Just, you know, quick, one word. What do you think about? We'll do a couple of these. What do you think about techie founders?
Techie founders, God bless them, we need more of them.
MBAs, accountants, and lawyers.
Very useful service professionals that we need to hire if we're techie nerd founders.
The School of Hard Knocks.
Worth its weight in gold. Nothing better than lean, mean, hungry, determined pursuit.
Silicon Valley.
Don't quote me on this. Past its prime, past its great zenith, Texas time has come.
Boston. Yeah. Boston.
Boston, New England. Life science powerhouse, great academic environments, great entrepreneurial environment. The taxes too high, third worst state to do business in.
Houston, Texas, and the Texas Medical Center.
That's why I'm here. I love it.
Angel investors.
We need more of them.
Venture capital investors.
A change game. Venture capital investors, upmarket, want to write big checks, can't bring a lot to the party anymore for startups.
Just a couple more. Philanthropy.
It's nice to get to a point where you can do that. The rewards of entrepreneurship.
How about family?
Family, most important of all. You can't be a happy camper on that front. You can't be a happy entrepreneur.
How about Inventure and the founders of Inventure?
A great gratification when some of them came to me and I said, my God, it's amazing. Where'd all you come from and how did you get here? And I just loved the answer. They said, Jack, we were so inspired by the people you brought to the class to see the Billy Cohn's, Art Sands, Cliff Dashos, and so forth of the world. Got us inspired. Therefore, we need a student, ground-up organization. And hats off to you. What a terrific job you've done.
Super. Well, I want to say big thanks to Jack Gill, Nancy Chang, and Glauco Souza.